Hey everyone, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our webinar with Mark Richardson. We're going to give it a few more minutes for folks to get signed on and we will start promptly at 2 o'clock. Thanks so much for being here. Hello again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We'll give it a few more minutes for folks to get logged on and we will plan to get started at 2 p.m. sharp. Thanks so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. We are still going to give it a few more minutes before we get started, but we want to make sure that everyone's technology is working appropriately. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a couple options, including a chat box and a Q&A box. In the chat box, if you could go ahead and put in there what methods you guys are currently using to schedule your time and schedule and manage your time. So we'll get started with that and kick off in just a few more minutes. All right, everyone, good afternoon. My name is Kristen. Excuse me, I will be your moderator for today. Thank you so much for joining us for today's presentation on time mastery, how to reduce stress and accomplish more in the new year with Mark Richardson. Before we get started, we want to take a quick poll of people, learn a little bit more about what you guys are hoping to get out of today's presentation and your goals for 2022. So I'm going to launch a quick poll here, and if you guys want to go ahead and answer that. I'll give you all a minute here. All right, we've got quite a variety of answers here, pretty even across the board. So we want to reduce some stress, achieve some goals, achieve more, and follow through on all of our commitments, all of which I think Mark will be touching on today. So it is my honor and pleasure to introduce Mark, who is a highly regarded pioneer in developing standards of professionalism in the construction industry. After more than 30 years with Case Design and Remodeling as president and co-chairman, and one of the leading remodeling organizations in the industry, he is high in demand as a national speaker, advisor, and author. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you, and happy holidays, everyone. I'm looking forward to, helping you with, a few of the, thoughts as you move into the new year. Many of you, I think when you saw some of the promotion on this particular webinar, I think part of the thinking behind the whole thing was, it was really going to be more about the stress and how to reduce stress and potentially accomplish more. A lot of people, I don't think, really realize that, what separates, I think, the good from the best of the best out there. We all are dealt the same cards, but it's in many ways how people are looking at time and how people are approaching the subject of time. I know that I've focused on this for many, many years and actually wrote the book, The Art of Time Mastery, which I encourage folks to, take a look at as a supplement. So today, what we're going to do is really three things. We're going to be trying to help you understand a little bit more about time. And that's, we all know what it looks like and smells like and feels like, but, I'm going to try to give you some different lenses to look at the subject of time. The second is that we're going to take some inventory of your time. I'm going to give you some tools and techniques that you can, over the holidays or certainly as you go into the new year, take some inventory about the time. And then third, I'm going to give you a system, a process that will absolutely help you not only reduce the stress and accomplish more, but really become more masterful at the subject of time. So in talking about this, I think, I've given this talk or variations of this talk to literally thousands of people. And what I've really realized that, all people are not time mastery equal. There are some of you out there that I think are, need some help here with the slides, I believe, Kristen. Some of you are, there we go, are, in a more of a rebuilding phase. Some of you more in a enhancement, and some of you really have your act together when it comes to time and, are really more in a growth phase. So if you're in a rebuilding phase, that's very much about rethinking and starting small and going back to the basics. If you're in that tweak and enhancement, it's all about, how do I reduce some stress or focus on particular elements. But, for those that are already relatively strong when it comes to time management, it's about really seeing some big ROI, gaining hours in the week and the day and accomplishing the big goals. So one of the questions I oftentimes ask is, why is this important? Why is being control of your time really important? And when I ask audiences, these are some of the answers I oftentimes get. Do you want to reduce stress? Stress is a product of overwhelm. Overwhelm is a product of having too many balls that you're juggling. And I think if you're more masterful of how you go about juggling those and reduce the overwhelm, you're going to ultimately reduce the stress. Second reason, I think, to be more focused on this is to be able to accomplish more. Who doesn't want to accomplish more, whether you're in sales or whether you're doing projects in remodeling or home improvement, or whether you, quite frankly, on a very personal side, just want to be able to, add some things into your new year in terms of accomplishing more. I think there's nothing wrong and certainly many things that are right with that. Another reason I think to have more control is so you can invest time into yourself. The reality is, if you're not investing time into yourself, if you're not making appointments with yourself, so to speak, and treating yourself with the same degree of reverence that you do everyone else, you're falling short. It's kind of like, when we talk about investing, if you're only setting aside, money under your pillow or under your mattress, you're actually going backwards because of just inflation and other things. I think when it comes to your time and improvement, the same thing also is true. Another reason, whether on a personal or professional front, is just to keep promises. Think about the number of times that you fell short on little promises, either, again, professional or personal. And in part, it was because of, not necessarily something slipped through from a time perspective. I think another reason that's oftentimes there that I believe, and that's just to be able to think more clearly about things. It's very, very hard, I think, in this crazy world we live in, to not necessarily be thinking as clearly. Well, if you are in control, if you're kind of keeping the ball in front of you, so to speak, from a time mastery point of view, you're able to kind of have a level of calm and clarity to your thoughts. And certainly last but not least is be able to achieve medium and long-term goals. What's interesting is, in the last 2-3 years, as things have gotten busy and certainly been heightened because of the pandemic, we've been very focused on the short term, getting through the day, getting through the week, and maybe getting through the month. But what about those medium-term goals? What about those 3 to 6 month goals? What about those long-term goals? Well, if you have more control of your time and you can kind of at least be devoting a little bit of time to those things, you are able to achieve those longer term goals. But the bottom line in all of this, for anybody that wants to accomplish this, it's a lot about just feeling better about yourself. It's about just feeling a little bit more in control and more fulfilled. So one thing I encourage in the spirit of understanding time, because I oftentimes, as I coach and I work with individuals, either leaders or leadership teams on this subject, they oftentimes will say, gosh, I'd like to improve on this, but I really don't have time to, which obviously is a huge contradiction, but that is oftentimes what we hear. I don't have time to get better at time mastery. So one way to think about it is when you start to take some inventory and you break it in parts, and just think about something as simple as figuring out a way to squeeze out 10 minutes a day. And this is so simple to do, to find those little voids in your day that you can get an extra 10 minutes. If you multiply that out, that's over 3,000 minutes in a year, which is 61 hours in a year, just by getting a little bit better at 10 minutes a day. Now at 30 minutes a day, that's 183 hours in a year. Think of that as this gift that you could be able to accomplish in this. I know in my last book that I wrote, I figured out ways to save 30 minutes to 60 minutes, and I was able to devote that time back and wrote another book in the course of that year because of it. 60 minutes is going to give you 365 hours in a year. So if you can figure out just ways to improve, even incrementally, 10 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, 60 minutes a day, which in themselves is not that much time, but you can develop the habits to be able to do that. Again, just think about what would you do with this big dividend of the time that you're going to create, whether it's 100 hours or 200 hours or 300 hours, but make it more concrete. And when I say make it concrete, say to yourself, okay, if I got an extra 183 hours in a year, what would I do with that time? And by writing down what you do with that 183 hours, you will motivate yourself to be able to stick with it. There's a reason why 92% of the time New Year's resolutions fail. And that's not because they didn't make sense as a resolution. It's in large part because you weren't able to stick to it. And you weren't able to stick to it in large part because you didn't have a monitoring system to be able to keep you on track. So one of the foundational elements that you need to understand if you want to try to improve on time is understand kind of this theme of being proactive versus reactive. Proactive is the time that's controlled by others, by you, and reactive, it's controlled by others. It's as simple as that. So one exercise I encourage you to do, and you don't have to do this now, but do write this down, is what percentage of your time is reactive, meaning others control, and what percentage of your time is proactive that you would control. So by really reflecting and think about this like in a week scale, what is percentage of reactive and what is proactive? Now, to give you a little bit of a tip and a secret on this, that the ideal place that you want to ultimately get to is about 80 or 85% proactive that you control versus reactive of being 15 to 20%. There's always going to be reactive things. So you're never going to eliminate it. However, you can reduce it. there are three sources to be able to reduce the reactive activities. Now, you all are in different walks of life in terms of the nature of your work and the types of businesses and all of that. So I can't speak to this kind of purely generically. But what I found in working with many on this subject, the three sources are clients, your team, and your family. They usually represent about 2/3 of your reactive time. So on your client side, what I encourage for those, especially in full service remodeling or somewhat home improvement kind of remodeling, is if you think about those clients and you say, okay, what clients do I have in the works, whether it's on the back burner or whether it's on the front burner in terms of active clients I'm working with. And on Monday, when you get ready to go, you actually proactively communicate to as many of those as you can. And by proactively communicating, you're controlling the dialogue. You're not waiting for them to interrupt you, and you will save time. Now, that's gonna ultimately gonna fall into three buckets: people that will respond to you, people that won't, or people that at least appreciate your professionalism and will at least thank you for being very proactive. Similarly with your team, you know, how positive is it when you're interrupting someone and they're impatient with you, they're frustrated with you because you're interrupting them. So rather than just being interrupted, what I'm encouraging with your team members is ask when you're interrupted and because you're involved in something, say to the person, can I get back to you on that in 30 minutes, in 60 minutes, and actually schedule an appointment to deal with them on that particular subject. Now, again, in the kind of the power of three, falls into three responses. One is they say just fine, and they structure a time. Two is they say, no, it's a fire, it's an emergency that needs to be addressed right now. Or there's a third, and we all know it, is they'll end up figuring it out on their own and it'll vaporize on you and you won't even have to deal with it at all. So again, oftentimes when it comes to our team, we think we're being unkind when we're not dropping everything and letting them control us. The same thing happens with your family. And I think the more that you actually move to more of a proactiveness and be in the moment with your family rather than frustrated and reactive, the better. Another theme that's important, I think, if you want to get kind of some understanding of time, is the whole notion of being efficient versus effective. Now, obviously, we want to have both of these. However, sometimes I think people get these two things confused. They think because we're efficient, we're more effective. And technology, by the way, has not necessarily helped us with texting and emailing. And think about the amount of times you're going back and forth and not necessarily accomplishing the desired goal or outcome in the best way. So I encourage everybody, before you immediately push the send button, what I want you to say to yourself, is this the most effective way to be able to address this particular question or issue or relationship? And if the answer is yes, fine, push the send button. If the answer is no, maybe pause and think about, is there a more effective way? Even if it's not quite as efficient, it might be more effective in terms of approaching things in a different way. And again, I find in particular, kind of this being a generational thing, that those like myself that didn't necessarily grow up with texting certainly do a lot of texting now, but it's very easy for me to at least ask myself, what is the best way or most effective way to be able to address this, not necessarily the most efficient way. So in the spirit of taking inventory, I've got this little exercise that I encourage everybody doing. And that is, you want to look at when you are best to do certain things, where you're doing it, and what the activity is that you need to be doing. So what I encourage is a simple chart. And you can literally just get out a piece of paper and make this chart. And on the far left, you have a vertical column that says when. And you break that into, you know, roughly 7 pieces of the day: early AM, mid-morning, late morning, midday, afternoon, evening, late evening. So once you have those categories of time, and I don't care whether you have 5 categories or whether you have 7 or 8, that's up to you, depending on, kind of what your cycle or cadence is. The next thing you do is think about your mindset. Now, this particular chart is me, it's my mindset. So early in the morning, I tend to be very, very reflective. That's when, having a cup of coffee, just reflecting on things rather than necessarily doing. Mid-morning, in my case, starting about 9 o'clock or so, that's when I really get the creative juices going. That's when I do a lot of the thinking, a lot of the writing, all those kind of things. Once I get into late morning, meaning like 11 o'clock, that's when I like to do kind of productive activities. Then once I get into the early afternoon, that's when I want to have a lot more interactive things with people. That's when I do oftentimes meetings and calls and all those. And then later in the afternoon, that's when I need to kind of take it down a notch a bit and start to do more of the rote activities, the administrative things, the things that quite frankly don't necessarily require a lot of thinking. And then in the evening and late evening, disconnect, then relax. Now, you can organize your day based on when you are having the right mindset. I oftentimes ask audiences, are you a morning person or an evening person? And what's interesting, and this has been the case every time I ask this question, literally thousands of people, they find that it's about 50-50. Half the people tend to be evening and half the people tend to be morning. Well, I just encourage you to adjust what you do and when you do it with what your natural cycle ends up being. And then the last element here is on the far right where it says where. Where are you going to do these things? The environment of how you go about accomplishing and where you do these things really makes a difference. So for example, with myself, if I'm going to be reflective, I need a quiet place. I don't need a lot of distractions. I don't need to be sitting at the breakfast table with a bunch of other people. It's much more of a quiet, reflective place. Mid-morning, it's more in my office and very focused. Once I get into the interactive, I can bounce around a little bit. It's not necessarily be sitting in one place and then going on into the evening and into the late evening as well. So by taking a little chart with this, again, you'll be able to determine, think about what your mindset is, what kind of activities, professionally or personally, that you do during the day, and then where is the best place to do it. So another inventory exercise that will help you reduce stress and accomplish more is by looking at the percentage of the time that you spend on different things, and then most importantly, look at what would be ideal. So let me give you another little chart. Again, very simple. You can just do this yourself. Piece of paper is on the far left, is list the different professional activities that you do. Now, I was working with an individual salesperson, actually a top gun, but an individual salesperson with this. And we said, okay, what kind of activities do you do? And the activities that this person did was sales, marketing. They had a little training during the week, had to go out and visit projects, had some internal meetings, site visits, and then administrative activities. Then I took what in his case was a typical week, 45-hour week in his case. And I said, okay, how many hours do you spend on each one of those? Even if you roughly guess. So this is what we came up with. 10 hours on sales appointment, which was roughly about 2 hours of sales appointment and a little bit of drive time on either end. And so that was about 5 sales appointments a week he was particularly doing. And you can see all the way down through the amount of hours. Then we kind of calculated the percentage of his time based on all that. And then I said, okay, let's imagine you have a blank canvas here and let's start from scratch. What would be ideal? If I'm giving you this 45 hours, what's ideal in terms of sales appointments for him? And in this case, since his job was to sell, he said, I'd like that to be a little bit more. So we tweaked that up to 12 hours. On the marketing side, in this case, to generate a little bit more leads, he said, I'd like to be able to spend a little bit more time nurturing, getting referrals, doing that kind of thing. Okay, well, let's increase that a bit. Training, he needed to focus on improving his close rate on these. So he said, okay, I want to invest a little bit more. Project work was about what he needed to do based on the amount of efficiency and what have you, and said, look, let me cut down on the number of meetings slightly, or at least take my meetings from not an hour long to 45 minutes and be able to pick that up a little bit. And then on site visits, kind of organize that a little bit differently to kind of bundle and package those in a more efficient way. And then also try to save a little bit of time on the administrative time. Now, you can see with this, it's the same 45-hour week, but he was able to get one more sales appointment a week. He was able to increase his close rate because he was doing a little bit more training, and then saved on some of the things that just weren't as effective and efficient as they needed to be. The bottom line is that he gave himself about a 15 to 20% raise as a result of this time exercise, and really, really saw a lot of benefits. So whatever your job is, you can take some inventory, especially as we move into the new year. Take some inventory of your time, look at what you're doing now, and then look at what would be ideal moving forward. Another exercise I like to do, and this one is a little less of taking inventory, what I call the stress clouds. This is something I created a few years ago, and I was just feeling a level of stress, and I don't know why, but I was kind of looking out the window and seeing these clouds roll in. And with these clouds rolling in the sky, I was seeing it started to kind of break the line of sight with the sun as it came down through. So I said, that's kind of interesting. The more cloudy the day is, the less, I feel great about myself. The more sunny the day, the better. So I created this little metaphor and exercise that I think can help you by looking at it as what I call the stress cloud process. So again, take a simple piece of paper and just literally draw a little stick figure, draw a person. And then what I want you to do is draw some clouds that represent those things that are weighing on you, those activities, those projects that are weighing. Then you're going to have some big things that are weighing on you, whether they're personal or professional. And then you're going to have some small things that are weighing on you that they go up there too. And obviously, you can have a whole bunch of clouds, small clouds that break the sun, or you can have one big cloud. Either way, you still have the same thing. So then what you do is you write one word in each cloud. And this is what this kind of, in this case, it was a meeting with the Joneses, it was a talk, and it was preparing for a trip. These three clouds in this little example were kind of creating the level of kind of that weight, that breathing in, that stress that just was weighing on you. It could be personal things related to the holidays. It could be, projects. It could be a client. It could be a conversation. It doesn't matter what it is. You can articulate what it is, but create a cloud for each one of those. When I do this with different individuals, we oftentimes end up with 3 to 6 or 7 clouds when they're really feeling stressed out, and we have a cloud for each one. Then what I want you to do is on each one is write 3 action steps. And those are action steps that would vaporize this cloud or make this cloud smaller so more sunlight would come through. So for example, with this Jones meeting coming up, writing an outline, setting the expectation with the Joneses on what the meeting was going to be, and just confirming all the participants that are going to be there. Those in itself would reduce the clouds, and similar with the trip as well as with the talk. And on the talk, it was doing a draft of the PowerPoint, getting the approval of that draft, and then practicing it. Even if it was rough 1 or 2 times, it reduced the amount of cloud, reduced the amount of stress. Then what you want to do is look at your calendar, look at your whatever you do to schedule. Ideally, it's like a daytimer type calendar, and just outline these particular bullets on the following days. Not necessarily the same day you're doing this, but tomorrow, I'm going to do the outline and I'm going to do a PowerPoint draft. I'm going to weave that into my planning for the day, and so on throughout the next several days. If you do this exercise, it will reduce the stress. The stress clouds will go down, and then you weave those in. And then literally on those next days coming up, it's a matter of just tackling. I do this exercise for myself probably every 7 to 10 days, just depending on, the level of stress I'm feeling. Sometimes it's more frequent and sometimes it's less frequent. But this is an exercise that's almost like taking a pill and reducing, I think, some of the overwhelm. And then you monitor it as you go over the course of the next 3 to 5 days. So moving into phase 3 of our little session today is a system. Now, it's great to talk about time. It's great to talk about, taking inventory of your time, but now we need to have a tool. We need to have a system that you can, in fact, master your time. Many, many years ago, I took a seminar with a psychologist at the University of Maryland, and they talked about, in this one-day seminar, they talked a lot about 10-year and 5-year goals and 1 year. And then in the last half hour, they talked about how to get through your day. And I remember coming out of that feeling, okay, I had a pretty good feel for the big picture of things, but I didn't really have what I needed to get through the day. So I realized and actually developed this system about 30 years ago. And in developing this system, I actually didn't intend for this to be a public and something everyone would have access to. But I started to have people coming up, noticing how I go about doing this and asking for my help in coaching them. One thing led to another, coaching a few people, to doing this with my company for the whole teams, to doing it in a local kind of venues with the associations, to doing it on a national format, and then obviously writing a book on the subject. So, this is something that, I'm sharing with you. I will say, when for most people, they have trouble not intellectually doing this particular system, but they have trouble sticking with it because of their existing habits. But what I can guarantee you, if in fact you can use a system, it will give you a gift of anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour a day. And you saw earlier in our webinar here what that represents as a gift. So at the end of the day, you don't need a very high IQ to be able to do it, but you do need to have a little bit of discipline to, in fact, be able to weave this into your day. So with all that being said, let me start with the Norman Vincent Peale quote, which I very much like. And he said, many, many years ago, plan your work for today and every day, then work your plan. Now, every word in this quote relates to what I'm going to be talking about. It all starts with a plan. Now, some of you think you do a plan because you do a to-do list. A to-do list, as you'll see in a minute, is a very early stage in the plan. It's kind of like saying build deck. No floor plan, no structure, no permit, no estimate, no flow chart, nothing. It's just build deck. That's what a to-do list is. In this case, the plan is in fact your blueprint for the day. Plan your work. Doesn't mean plan your life. I believe that you can in fact let many sides of your personal life, just let them go. Matter of fact, I truly believe on weekends, oftentimes don't make a plan for my weekends because I like, my family members to have more control and influence. For today means do it just today. You're going to have some direction, vision, goals, priorities for the balance of the week or the balance of the month. But this detailed planning tool I'm giving you is for today. The best of the best out there have very strong plans for the day. Then the balance of the week, they have, very appropriate kind of goals and direction. And then they have a vision longer term. Do it every day. Every day is because you need to create the habits, the success habits. And only then that you've done all the first 2 lines here, you work your plan. It's no different than don't start the project while you're in the middle of the planning. wait till the planning's over, have it all buttoned up as tightly, and then launch into the project itself. So here's the system. I'm going to take you through the system, and there's 10 basic steps, but I'm going to take you through, and then I'm going to show you an example of this that you can take a look at yourself. So it all starts with a setup, and I'll explain what some of these are. Then we do a brain dump, which is like what you're doing now, and that's a to-do list. Then we take a little bit of time to reflect. We want to put in the right amount of minutes in terms of the time, and this will make more sense in a minute. We want a timeline to set up. You want an analysis of this timeline and brain dump, and we want to block out the different major events throughout the day. Could be meeting, conference calls, Zoom calls, whatever, webinars. Incorporate the activities. Now I'm hooking together the timeline and the activities, and then I'm launching. And then one of the keys to this is monitoring. The way you need to think about monitoring, and you've got to do it every 60 to 90 minutes. It's kind of like a pilot flying from DC to LA. You know, they make many, many little adjustments along the way in terms of air traffic and wind and weather and all sorts of things, ground speed. And by monitoring it every 60 to 90 minutes, you're able to be able to stay on course and end up at that destination that you outlined at the beginning of the day. So this is a system. It's a process. It's no different than you have processes when you get up in the morning and you get ready to go to work. It's no different than when you start a remodeling project, you have processes. You know, start to treat yourself with the same degree of reverence that you do all these other things that you're familiar with, and you realize a process is in many ways all you need. Now, a little bit of groundwork, or a little bit of ground rules, so to speak, framework for the first 30 days. Now, you're going to need a 30-day commitment if you want to form the habits and see these returns I'm talking about of 100 to 300 hours a year. You've got to form the habits. And the only way to form a habit is that commit to 30 days. If you commit to 30 days, you will in fact be able to benefit. Matter of fact, one offer that certainly my hosts and sponsors aren't even aware of, I will be your time management coach for the first 30 days. Now, all you need to do is text me or email me, and I'll be glad to try to help you in the first 30 days. Realize that the first week is going to be tough. The first week in anything that you do is tough, whether it's in cycling or riding a bike, or whether it's in starting a new job, or whether it's in a different role. Same is true with this system. Just recognize once I get through a week or two of this, I'm actually going to start to see some return. Number 3, which is a little bit dogmatic, and for a guy that tends to break a few rules, you wouldn't normally hear this, but you got to follow my techniques 100%. And I'm only saying this because I want you to be successful at it. After 30, 60 days, do it however you'd like. I will find those that follow the techniques 100% or close to 100% are the ones that see the greatest return. You must invest a minimum of 30 minutes a day. Now, some people say, I don't have 30 minutes a day. I will give you, after the first month, a dividend of an hour a day if you can give me 30 minutes a day. So there's a big ROI, but you've got to invest minimum of 30 minutes a day. Another bullet, which oftentimes is a little bit controversial for some, and that is, I like to think of your day holistically. So include the personal and the professional activities in together. The reality is, if you forget to buy that little toy on your way home from work or something like that doesn't have anything to do with your professional world, how are you going to feel? You're not going to feel great. So therefore, make sure as you're doing your brain dump, you're including everything. Try to be disciplined, but not obsessive. I know that one of the early people I taught this to, his name was Bill, he went home after learning some of these techniques and decided his wife and his teenage son needed to have some time mastery lessons. This is for you. This is not for you to teach it. It's for you to do it. And once you've mastered it, you can certainly think about teaching it, but try not to get too obsessed. This is about improving and having a more comfortable life. It's not necessarily about you, kind of disciplining others. So step number one, it's what I call the setup. Now the setup, you need a quiet place. It's very critical you have a quiet place. Don't try to do this exercise, this 30-minute exercise, at the breakfast table with your family. It's not a quiet activity. If you need to go find a quiet area of your home, if you're traveling, what have you, find a quiet area in an airport or even in a fast food restaurant. Doesn't matter, but find a quiet place. Start 60 minutes before your first scheduled activity. So if you have a meeting, it starts at 9, then you got to be sitting down working on this by 8 or earlier. Use a spiral notebook. And I know that this is especially challenging for some, but you can see even someone like myself that's mastered this, I still use a spiral notebook. Doesn't mean you don't use your computer and Outlook and everything else, but when it comes to this blueprint or plan, use a spiral notebook. You'll keep all the papers together. You'll be able to refer to earlier days, and it's much more effective. Have all your data, your notes, your tools, your phone, your computer in front of you, because you want to have all the information possible to organize and plan that day in front of you so you don't end up with a plan that's like Swiss cheese. Turn off your cell phone, at least for that 30 minutes, turn it off. You've got to be in the zone. This is a planning activity. This is surgery. This is an operation on your day, and don't have any distractions if you can avoid it. And now you're ready to plan. So that overall setup is really, really important. Matter of fact, I was working with someone out in California several years ago, and he was doing most of these things, except he realized that, let me just do it in my office and close my door. And he was doing that, and all that sounded good, except people were so used to interrupting him. He got constant interruptions. So all we did in his case is he went and worked out while he did this in the conference room that people didn't know where he was. By doing it that way, he was able to be much more successful. So what you're going to do is you're going to literally sit with a full 8.5 by 11 paper, and up on the top left. And again, this is going to be a little bit tricky for some of you. So I encourage those that really want to try these techniques, get a copy. Kristen's going to send you a copy of this webinar, and you can watch this particular couple of slides coming up. Or again, you can order the book through Amazon, The Art of Time Mastery, and it'll give you all the techniques on it. So the first thing you do is you put up the date, and then you put up a theme for the day. If your theme for the day was to create more balance, it might be balance. The next thing you do is what I call the brain dump. That's what you do now. That's your to-do list. And you literally brain dump, make a list on the left-hand side, all the different things, and then you finish when there's nothing else kind of flowing out from your calendar or in your head. In this case, you can see lunch, meetings, picking up a card, reviewing a contract, making a call to different parts of the country, setting up a radio, a schedule on the radio. All those kind of things, obviously, where activities are going to take time. And then you have reactive time. The next thing you do is you literally get up and you go get a cup of coffee or a glass of water, whatever happens to be, go outside, get some fresh air, and you're literally going to take, a couple of minutes just to reflect and ask yourself, is there anything else that I want to try to accomplish today? And when you do that, you will always come up with at least one or two more things. In this case, I wanted to, jot down some notes on a training concept, and I wanted to call my godfather and set up a lunch. So again, whether personal or professional doesn't really matter. So now you have all of your activities you need to do that day. You have reactive time, and then you have that one or two items that are going to come from the reflective things. The next thing you want to do is you need to attach time to the activities. So it's really simple. All you do is you go down and you put the number of minutes each one of these are going to take. and when you're not sure, just guess. And if you want to guess a little higher, great. If you want to guess a little lower, that's fine. You will learn over time to be able to estimate more accurately. And then for everybody doing this, for the first 30 days, I want you to include 120 minutes of reactive time. If after a month or two, you find that you don't need that much reactive time, we'll reduce it down. I adjust my own personal reactive time, usually about every 3 or 4 months. Right now, I'm in about a 40-minute reactive time. It's been as low as 30 and as high as 50 or 60. But I encourage everyone, when they're just beginners at this, start with 120 minutes. The next thing you want to do is really simple. You don't need any more than a 4th grade education to add up all the minutes and come up with the amount of minutes in the day. Now that gives you, in this case, 11.25 hours in this example I'm giving. The next thing you want to do is you want to set up a timeline. On the right side of the paper, we literally draw a straight line. And then what we do is we put little circles that represent different kind of points in the day that you have some scheduled activities or you want to block out time. And then you put some times next to that. So as you can see, we have a series of these 5 or 6 blocked out times. The next thing I want to do is I want to put a symbol. Now the symbols I recommend is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it's going to change day to day. Every day is a different timeline. So you want to have, symbols that represent and can expand to whatever number. In my case, some days it goes up to F, and some days it'll go all the way up to R or S in the alphabet. The next thing you want to do is when you have a scheduled call or a meeting or a training or something like that, you want to literally block out that time. You want to make this as visual as you can. So in this case, I clearly had a meeting between 8:30 and 10, and then one from 2 to 3. So now it gives me kind of my window of what my day looks like. So now what I want to do is I want to incorporate the two together. So you can see on the left side, the letters going down is I'm literally hooking the two together. I'm hooking those blocks of time with the activities. So for example, having my one-on-one with Bill Miller, 60-minute one-on-one, that's the time slot that I was having that particular meeting, which was 2 to 3 o'clock. So I had that blocked out. So I have all the meetings. And then when I want to look at this, I notice also, from when I'm starting my day to when I was at the end of the day, 7 o'clock to 6 o'clock, that's 11 hours. And I know that I can fit 11 hours in about 11.25 hours. So that makes this day work. The next thing is I'm going to do some analysis. And the analysis, as you'll see, I'll just add up all the A's, all the B's, all the C's, and they will tell me whether it's realistic or not for me to accomplish those activities in that amount of time in the time slot. So you take the A, for example, and you add up all the A's on the left side, I come up with 80 minutes. Can I do 80 minutes between 7 and 8:30? The answer is yes, because that's 90 minutes. And that then obviously shows me that that works. The next thing I want to do, now I've got a plan, right? So as you're reflecting at this, I'll let you just look at this just for a minute or so. I've got a plan in place. I've got a blueprint. I've got an outline for my day, so to speak. The next thing I want to do is launch it. All I need to think about and worry about is what is at the beginning. I don't even know many days what I'm doing in the afternoon. All I know is I've got to follow this plan because it was well thought out at the beginning of the day. So what I want to do is literally start with the A's. So I do all the A's and I launch it. And then what I'm doing from there is I monitor it throughout the day. So every 60 to 90 minutes, I'm saying, am I on track or am I not on track? If I'm not on track, I'll do typically like in a football game, a halftime review. You know, if I go into the game and at halftime, if I'm winning 20-10, then I might adjust my second half of the day. If in halftime I'm losing 10-20, then I'm going to adjust my end of the day. Similarly, I think with this is you're going to find if you're monitoring it, you're going to have to do some tweaks throughout the day. But for the most part, you should be able to stay on track and at least 3 or 4 days of the week be able to accomplish what your plan represents. So that is your plan. Now, next thing I want to talk about are some common mistakes with this. And we're going to move into kind of some common mistakes. And again, as I said earlier, many of the things I've just shown you, you can watch this webinar again if you do want to try to tackle it. But some of the common mistakes that people go into this, because most people take a webinar or take my course in this, will say, oh, absolutely, I can do this. But as I already said, only about 20%, I think, really do it successfully of those that say they're going to do it. So a common mistake is trying to force 14 hours in a 10-hour day. Now, obviously, I showed you an example that worked, but you're going to have at the beginning, you're going to have days that are either a 10-hour day that you only have 6 hours of stuff, or more commonly, you're going to have a 10-hour day with 14 hours. You've got to keep working the plan. That's all you're doing is setting yourself up for failure. Don't do that. Activities are too general. You know, you try to be a little bit more specific with the activities. If you're putting together a proposal for a client, break it in 2 or 3 parts. I'm going to do an outline, I'm going to do an estimate, and I'm going to do a presentation. Break it in parts and figure the amount of time for each. Doing only a 15-minute plan. You know, I can tell right away when I'm coaching people how much time they spend on this. You need a minimum of 30 minutes a day. I generally spend about 45 minutes a day planning my day. So this is not necessarily because of more experience, you can do it faster. It's not faster, it's better. You need minimum 30 minutes. Not being in a quiet place. You know, I shared the story before of the person that was in his office and getting knocks on the door. He was not able to do it effectively. Getting creative in this process. Don't get creative. Follow my process, my steps, just like a recipe, baking cookies, follow them 100% for the first 30 days. And then not monitoring every 60 to 90 minutes. You know, that's oftentimes, I think, where people fall short and, you know, giving up on the time system too soon. You know, the first week, I think for many of you, I've already said, it's going to be a little herky-jerky. It's not going to be easy, but if you can hang in there for 30 minutes, I promise you, you will see huge returns after, you know, 2 or 3 months of doing this process. So some frequently asked questions. Should I do this over the weekend? It's totally up to you, but honestly, I don't recommend it. I surrender over the weekend and I give my time to other things. And I don't think that you need to have this rigor and discipline over the weekend, but that's up to you. It works just as well on the weekends as does the weekdays. Can I use another type of notebook? Sadly, no. You've got to use a spiral notebook. The spiral notebook is tested, it's proven. You can get it at the bookstore, wherever, and you know, just use this at least for the 30 days. It's not going to cost very much to just buy a simple spiral notebook, and I think you'll be appreciative of having it. When should I return emails and calls? You know, this is a great question. Some people approach this who get a lot of emails and those kind of things. I tend to return emails and calls in between things. Some people like to block out a couple times during the day that they're going to catch up on emails and calls. I don't think there's a right or wrong with that, but I would experiment and find what would make the best for you. Can I do the planning the night before? No, unfortunately. Something mysteriously happens over the night. For those that are used to doing this, what you can do is do a simple little brain dump, but then do an effective planning session always the morning of. What if my brain dump does not add up to the time allowed for the day? As I said before, don't force 14 hours of activity in a 10-hour day, but similarly, don't force or don't just leave it at the 6 hours of activity and you got a 10-hour day. Try to make those match. So you might have some more medium and longer term things that you can work on, but I generally like to have those very much in sync. Can I make changes to the plan during the day? Absolutely. You can make adjustments and changes throughout the day. And what happens as your day, what I call crashes and burns? You're on your way into the office or you're doing an activity and you get a call from the school saying that your child is sick. What happens? Well, those things will happen. You know, don't fret it. Take care of whatever that emergency is, and then restart or replan for the balance of the day. I find with most people, they don't have any days right now that are as strong as what this system will allow. However, if you do the system effectively, 3 of the days you'll hit it 100%, 1 of the days you'll hit it 80 or 90, and 1 day will be a little bit more of a crash and burn day, and you just have to accept. This is all about being better. So some key takeaways. You know, mastering time is a choice. You know, the most successful people out there have chosen to master their time. If you fail to plan to fail. It takes 30 days to form a habit. So if you can't commit to 30 days, i.e. January coming up to do this, then probably you need to put it on the back burner. Hopefully there's been some insights that'll be interesting as a result of attending this, but it's going to take 30 days. Be proactive, not reactive. Monitor, monitor, monitor. It's so important as you're moving through, just like that pilot, check air traffic, check the weather, check the airspeed as you're moving through the day, and you'll get to the end. And the numbers don't lie. You'll get better and better at estimating and plugging in these numbers, but they don't lie to you. So if you end up adding up a whole bunch of numbers, oh, I'll be able to do that faster. Don't do that to yourself. All you're doing is setting yourself up. And last but certainly not least, your success is not a noun. It's really a verb. It's a verb in terms of what you do to accomplish it. You know, it's oftentimes said, you know, intention without actions equals squat. So I encourage everybody that's listening to this, give yourself, I think, this gift and try developing either this system or really dramatically improving this over the next 30 days. So I want to thank everybody and kind of turn it back over to Kristen. And I would encourage, like I said, feel free, The Art of Time Mastery. You can get that book and that will help you, I think, on this journey of using the specific systems and processes that I talked about. Kristen, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. We really appreciate it. That was a fantastic presentation. We do have some time left for some Q&A. I did see a couple questions come through. If you haven't asked your question yet, go ahead and throw it into the Q&A box or the chat box. While we wait for those questions to come through, just a couple of housekeeping things on our end. We are running a special here for those that are joining us live today. You can get lunch on Leap. If you have a conversation with Leap, we will give you up to $500, a gift card for lunch. And if we're a good fit for each other, we will give up to $500 off to use towards your Leap subscription. Leap can help you guys get rid of redundancies and errors and save some time in your day as well. So if you guys would like to have lunch on Leap, I'm going to launch a poll right here for you guys. Go ahead and put your answers in there. Additionally, Leap will be at the World of Concrete Expo next month, January 18th through the 20th. So please feel free to come stop by and say hello. We will be in the North Hall at booth 1767. And finally, we do want to invite you all to our webinar next Tuesday, the 4th, with Charles Antis of Antis Roofing, who will be discussing driving culture and brand driving culture, brand, and community with your business and the power of maybe. Again, that'll be next Tuesday, and that will be at 4 p.m. EST. All right, so just a couple quick questions here. We did have one, and Mark, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this. How to handle burnout and exhaustion, especially in the middle of the day, if we're losing steam, how can we handle that?
Well, I think, at the risk of sounding like a psychologist or a therapist, I think you got to get to the root of what's causing this burnout and exhaustion. I have found that more times than not, it is a product of overwhelm. It is a product of not being in control. And I think if you can, take the discipline to leverage some of the techniques, put more time, not less time, into planning the day and then working the plan rather than just doing the day and reacting, I think you're going to reduce it. If not anything else, you'll be able to get to the root of what's causing it. Another comment is, I think there's nothing wrong with saying no. Sometimes saying no is the kindest thing that you can do, as opposed to, saying yes, feeling resentful, and then not doing what you're promising that you want to do.
Awesome. I think that's really helpful. The power of no is very powerful. And one other quick question, what would you suggest is the very first step in time management? Would you go straight to the chart of, how to schedule your day, or would you go straight to the planning? There was a lot of information here. What's the number one thing that we can do to get started in our time management?
Well, I guess, number one, I think it's like a lot of things. I think I would probably listen to this webinar again. I would probably read the book if it's, if you're having trouble sleeping at night, read the book, and it'll help you to, calm yourself and sleep at night as well. But I would say the first thing is, yes, take inventory. If you look at some of those charts that I shared with you, of really understanding more yourself, understanding how you're spending your time, understanding where you can improve on it, that's probably where I would start before I would dive right into the system itself. The system is the prescription, it's the pill, but taking the inventory is like taking the blood test and cholesterol checkup and all of that.
Awesome. Mark, thank you so much. Those are all the questions that we had for today. Thank you guys again for joining us today. We will be emailing out a recording of the webinar so you guys can watch it again. And we will also include a link to Mark's book so you guys can purchase that. You can also check out our website at Leap and check out the resources tab on our website, where we have more webinars, ebooks, blogs, and other things. If you said you wanted to learn more about Leap, one of our reps will be reaching out to you directly. Otherwise, thank you all again. Thank you, Mark. We appreciate your time for today. We look forward to seeing you guys again on a future webinar, and Happy New Year to you all.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Thanks, Mark.